Welcome everybody to this important event. It is great to have you all here. My name is Andrew Steer. I'm the President and CEO of the World Resources Institute, and it's a great honor for us, together with Cgiar and the Climate Adaptation Summit, to host this event. Our subject today is the role of agricultural research and innovation in addressing the problems of climate. Both the problem of how do we become more resilient to the climate change that is happening, how can the rural food systems and agricultural systems increase our resilience as part of the adaptation agenda, but also what role does agriculture and the innovation that we're going to discuss today play in terms of addressing greenhouse gas emissions. We face a crisis of our own making, and the food and agricultural system is in many ways just as central to that crisis as the energy system is. Perhaps 30% of the problem of climate change is caused by food and agriculture, and the evidence suggests that it could be playing a very, very important part, perhaps a third of the solution we need to find. We will not find that solution in the absence of world-class research and innovation. And that's why it's a great pleasure to be discussing today, among other things, the role of the Cgiar system. The Cgiar system is one of the great inventions in the history of science and technology. It has brought together a group of leading research centers globally, and it seeks to add that up to really transform the world of food and agriculture. And over the last few years, the issue of climate change has become more and more important. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the so-called 2-degree initiative. And to kick us off, I'm very pleased to invite Mark Kackler from the World Bank. He is Manager of Agriculture and Food Security for the entire World Bank. Mark, over to you to help us frame the issue.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to join you all today. The 2-degree initiative for food and agriculture is essential to achieve the development goals that we all share. People don't always realize that 80% of the world's poor are rural, and most are engaged in farming. The math is simple. We simply cannot eliminate poverty and hunger without more and better investment in agriculture and food systems, and doing it sustainably. And we especially need more and better research and more and better investment in agricultural research, especially in the face of the climate emergency. Unfortunately, decision makers often do not adequately appreciate the effectiveness of agricultural research for development. The audience on this call knows that investment in agricultural research generates high returns. For example, a new report by the supporters of agricultural research, the SOAR Foundation, found a 10-to-1 benefit-cost ratio on Cgiar investments for almost 5 decades. We need to do a better job of getting that message out. One aspect of more and better investment means continuing to emphasize the importance of a bottom-up perspective when designing research, highlighting the importance of strong partnerships among farmers, researchers, governments, development agencies, and the private sector for successful agricultural research for development. We also need to focus more on the outcomes of research and not be content with simply documenting good science in journal publications. I don't mean to suggest that blue sky research isn't important, but the reason the World Bank supports agricultural research is because, and only because, of its contributions to getting results on the ground to reduce poverty and hunger and promote shared prosperity sustainably. Recent changes in the Cgiar to further increase its emphasis on development outcomes is a major reason why the World Bank continues to champion the Cgiar. On the specific topic of agricultural research and development and climate change, we are proud of our collaboration with the Cgiar's climate change program, CCAFS. For example, in Kenya, Cgiar CCAFS developed a national climate smart agriculture profile which contributed to the design of the $250 million World Bank financed Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project. We have partnered with Cgiar CCAFs on submissions to the UNFCCC, for example, on nutrient use and manure management. More recently, the World Bank has been a partner of the Transforming Food Systems Initiative, and we are leveraging work that Cgiar CCAFs and Wageningen University are doing on food loss and waste. I would like to close by sharing with you that this is a special day for us. In a few hours, the World Bank Board of Directors will be voting on a new project called Accelerating Impact of Cgiar Climate Research in Africa, or ICRA. This project was initiated by the World Bank President, David Malpass himself, as part of our commitment for action on the climate emergency. And if approved by our board later today, this new incremental financing for $60 million over the next 3 years will represent a major increase in World Bank support for the Cgiar system. This would not have been possible without strong confidence in the future of one Cgiar and all its partners. And in that context, I would like to thank both Bruce Campbell, the director of CCAFs, and Marco Ferroni, the chair of the Cgiar System Board, for helping us to reach this day. Thank you all for your attention. And now let me please turn the virtual floor back over to Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark, for those framing words. I turn now to Marco Ferroni. Marco is the chair of the Cgiar Systems Board. Before this, he's had a whole range of very distinguished posts, from jobs at the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, and most recently, he was the executive director of the Syngenta Foundation, which does some very remarkable work. Marco, tell us how you see this, and you might just say a word also about the Cgiar, the one Cgiar reforms that are going on right now.
I will try to do this. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I want to thank, first of all, WRI and CCAFs for hosting this important event. I applaud the 2 Degrees initiative for what it represents, namely nothing less than the transformation of the global food system for a climate smart future. The meaningful pursuit of this ambitious goal requires powerful partnerships, credible strategies and methods of work, and the right kind and volume of funding, including funding for research and innovation. I know that the listening sessions that we will be hearing about today cover all of this and more, no doubt. And I applaud the notion of listening, as I set out on my remarks. Why? Because of the centrality of partnership in what we are talking about, and the centrality of listening to each other for successful partnership. I'd like to speak a little bit to all of this from the perspective, again, of Cgiar, as you have invited me to do, Andrew, focusing in particular on the role of research and innovation. The world's food system is more fragile than most people think. CCAF's recent report, Actions to Transform Food Systems Under Climate Change, identifies the food system as failing for various reasons that I don't have time to go into. Cgiar is taking this extremely seriously, as exemplified, for example, by our new research and innovation strategy to 2030 and our new operational structure and organization. The latter is designed to integrate our relatively large organization's capabilities, assets, people, and global presence for a new era of impactful, interconnected, partnership-driven research and innovation to achieve specific goals. Our research and innovation strategy's theme is transforming food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. The term systems is particularly important for a number of reasons, including the implied ambition. To rise to the challenges we are talking about within serviceable timeframes, we need to change entire systems, no longer just selected, often small components thereof. The 2 Degrees initiative understands this very clearly. The research and innovation strategy will deliver against 5 impact areas, one of which is climate adaptation and mitigation. It will do this through regional and global Cgiar initiatives and coherent synergistic country and regional engagement, among other aspects, and I do not have time to explain all of this in detail. On innovation specifically, the strategy recognizes that to change the world, you need innovation. Research per se is not innovation, but innovation requires research. The role of applied research, along with other enablers, is to make sure innovation can occur. Innovation is about combination. It is never a single event. Combination is the assembly in innovation ecosystems of the different contributions needed to develop and take to users, which can be individuals or governments, the products, services, policies, or solutions that improve people's lives, change environmental outcomes, and in general, achieve the public policy goals that we pursue. We can illustrate this with the help of examples. It is often not straightforward, but it is the path to achievement. One aspect, by definition, present in successful innovation is partnership, with which I have come back to the beginning of my intervention. Partnership is the glue that ties the different elements of the innovation combinations together. Thank you, and I'm happy to participate in the discussion if there is time.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Marco, and congratulations on all you're doing in terms of reforming and streamlining the Cgiar. A couple of years ago, a number of countries decided that we really needed to raise the political profile and financial profile of adaptation, and the Global Commission on Adaptation was created, chaired by Bill Gates, Ban Ki-moon, and Kristalina Georgieva, who's head of the IMF. 18 countries at head of state level commissioned it. The Dutch government played a very important role, and for us at the World Resources Institute, it was an honor to be, it has been an honor to be one of the two managing partners together with the new Global Center of Adaptation. Agriculture and rural development was central to our thinking as we ran that commission. And we recognized very early on that agricultural research and innovation, is not just something for experts to lead. Citizens, farmers, financiers, a whole group of stakeholders are close to the action and need to have a voice. And so the Commission launched a process of listening, if you like. And it's a pleasure now to introduce Rebecca Carter, who is the Deputy Director for Climate Resilience at the World Resources Institute, who's been overseeing some of that process. And she's going to summarize what we've learned. Rebecca.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm very happy to be here with you all today to share some of the emerging results from this 2-degree initiative. Let me just share my screen quickly. All right, hopefully that's visible. So the 2-degree initiative takes, Cgiar established 10 regional challenge sessions, 10 regional challenges as part of the 2-degree initiative. And these listening sessions took place in 9 out of 10. And as you can see, they really do span the globe. 4 of them are focused on sub-Saharan Africa. 1 is on the Middle East and North Africa. 2 focus on Latin America. There's 1 for the Asian megadeltas, and even 1 for resilient fisheries and aquaculture that takes place in 3 subregions around the world. So for these listening sessions, each of these regional challenges had the same 4 goals, and they were to develop a vision, set forth key priorities, establish targets, and create a roadmap. And most of them followed a similar process to engage. The first, and I should mention also that in light of the COVID-19 epidemic, even though this was originally conceived of as being in-person events, everything had to be moved online. So most of the regional challenges started with an online survey to take stock of the challenges and opportunities and kind of get to know the stakeholders and their perspectives in advance. Then that was followed by a kickoff webinar that introduced the regional challenges and made sure that everyone understood the purpose of the listening sessions and how they would inform the research agenda going forward. They then moved on to smaller sub-regional discussions that in some cases were focused on themes like finance. Some targeted specific groups of stakeholders such as the private sector or CSOs, and some focused more at a country or sub-regional level. And then most convene a final stakeholder webinar to validate the findings and fill in any gaps. Even though each of these 9 regional challenges followed the same general process and had the same goals, you can see that there was quite a bit of variation on how they implemented the process. Some chose to convene a great many sessions and hundreds of participants, while others held smaller events. But when we added up how many listening sessions were convened over this 6-month period, it was 52, and a total of 465 stakeholders were engaged. They were indeed a broad group of stakeholders, and they included NGOs and CSOs, and those included farmers' organizations, the private sector, government, research organizations, donors, and also regional and international organizations and networks, such as FAO and EFAD. Now, as you might imagine, distilling key findings from such a diverse group of stakeholders in so many different locations and contexts was a bit challenging. But we found that when we asked the question, how might your research agenda change in light of the 2-degree initiative and the listening sessions moving forward, there were some key points that emerged across the sessions. The first one was reforming research development and deployment pathways so that a broader range of stakeholders receive the solutions that will truly benefit them. Second, employing an interdisciplinary intersectional food systems approach by working across silos with underengaged groups from regional to national to local levels. The third was to improve tools and communication for policymakers so that they're able to access the data they need and are motivated to enact change. Number 4, collaborating more with private companies to accelerate innovation and improving finance and information platforms. The 5th one, engaging more deeply with policymakers, regional bodies, and global processes to ensure alignment with global efforts to reflect, but at the same time still reflect local context and priorities. The 6th one, leveraging digital technologies to provide real-time advisories and critical market services. 7, strengthening co-creation along value chains, especially with women and youth and other underserved groups. And number 8, prioritizing transformative approaches, which might include shifting value chains, but also transitioning between different types of agriculture or even out of agriculture in some cases where the impacts of climate change are most severe. Let me stop there, as I know that some of our other speakers will go more deeply into the results of these sessions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Rebecca, for that overview. We're now going to turn to the head of the climate change, agriculture, and food security component of the CGIAR, the so-called CCAFS, Dr. Bruce Campbell, one of the leading thinkers and researchers in the world on the link between agriculture and climate change. The CCAFS has a budget of about $50 to $60 million a year, basically throughout the CGIAR system, to analyze, to do research, to make agriculture both more resilient, but also reduce carbon emissions and even absorb carbon back from the atmosphere. So Bruce is going to talk to us about the priorities that come from this exercise that we've just been through. And then Alan Tollovy, who is the Senior Agriculture and Livelihoods Advisor in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom government. He's going to respond to that, but also talk a little bit about the path towards COP26 next year when these issues are particularly important. So over to you, Bruce, followed by Alan.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So Rebecca mentioned the 10 regional challenges that are on the cards. So for me, these are really the crucial part of 2-degree initiative, because we really have to get locally relevant in terms of the challenges, policy connected, that's at national and local levels, very target oriented to the specific targets of the regions, and as everybody's been indicating, this has to be a partnership-based approach. If we're going to achieve significant outcomes, as researchers, we need to work with the private sector, the major development agencies and national governments to achieve those targets. But what I wanted to focus on in this short presentation was not on those regional challenges, but rather what we see coming out as some of the emerging topics for a global research program. So we've convened all the flagship leaders, the regional challenge leaders around the world to look at some of the emerging topics which should form the glue amongst the regions to promote South-South learning, to produce synergies, and also so that the regional efforts can link into the global narratives. There's 7 emerging flagships or research topics. These are very preliminary, and there's going to be engagement and discussion around them in the coming months. Here we go. So the first one is the bread and butter of the Cgiar system, technologies and practices. So in many of the regions, these came out as important areas to focus on. And so this, we do imagine some global theme around technologies and practices and bringing, for example, things that we learn from one region into other regions. Climate information services. And as Rebecca has also mentioned, this is going to have a strong digital part to it. Given the scale of the issue, 500 million small-scale producers, I think we really have to think a lot about digital. The third area, it's recognized throughout all these regional challenges that if we don't get the policy and institutional development right, the context right, we're not going to scale the technologies. So we see a significant amount of work happening on policy and institutional development. The fourth one, empowerment. Adaptation is often at the local level, so we see a global theme on gender and youth and social inclusion, making sure that we can bring out some of the common elements that are needed to drive change at the local level. The fifth one is mostly on the emissions agenda. So in many of the regional challenges, a lot of the discussion was around adaptation, and that is where it should be. But there's also the potential for putting agriculture and food systems on a low emissions development pathway. The next one, climate finance and climate resilient food systems, the real engagement of the private sector, linking consumers with producers, bringing many-fold more finance into the agricultural sector. It has to come through private sector engagement. And the last one, there's a lot of recent work on migration, conflict, and security. So we're thinking about a global theme on climate security and migration. Thanks very much, Andrew. And I'll actually hand straight over to Alan. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. That was really interesting. And let me try and, as Andrew said, take that, what you've presented, and cite it within the work that we're doing in the run-up to COP26 at the end of next year. And particularly the Nature campaign in COP26, which is focusing, I think, really around a step change in scale and pace of investment in R&D. A realignment of R&D systems, I think, to deliver benefits in terms of adaptation and mitigation. We know that, we've heard earlier that the food system is at the heart of a series of impacts across the global environment. And the campaign really is embedded in the idea, embedded within the idea of the campaign is the need for a realignment of innovation systems. And the sort of ideas that Bruce was presenting there, with the global campaigns, the 7 or 8 ideas, are right at the center of that thinking. And the CG itself is reforming, CGIAR itself is reforming around some of these ideas. Things like incentivizing end-to-end approaches, really having action-orientated, outcome-focused R&D programs that are looking at early stage R&D right through to delivery at scale, and bringing in partners right across the whole of the pipeline to support that work, connecting in at the high end to foundational science and really, new cutting edge science, right down to delivery partners, bringing in the private sector, realigning the relationship between international research and the national systems, the innovation systems that drive forward innovation with farmers, and making the whole system more demand driven, connecting into demand. One of the big problems we see is that taking agroecology and some of the natural resource management solutions to scale has been a real challenge because it doesn't really meet the demand of end users. They deliver on some areas, but in terms of people actually benefiting from these practices, it doesn't work so well. So really refocusing on meeting demand. These are right at the core of the COP campaign. We see a lot of fragmentation across the global innovation system around agriculture and food, and we think that needs to be brought back together to a much more consistent and consolidated approach to investment. And particularly around some of those key areas around agroecological approaches and regenerative agriculture and restoring biodiversity and reducing some of the environmental impacts of food production across the planet. We see this as a really important area that the Cgiar and that the 2 Degree Initiative can take on in the future. So really excited around these ideas, and we think they're really right at the heart of the COP campaign that we're working on. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Alan, as well. Sorry, I'm turning my camera back on. That was really helpful. Thank you, Bruce, for sort of clarifying sort of where you're heading on the research agenda. And Alan, I mean, congratulations on what you're doing. The UK government as presidency of the COP, really putting these issues sort of absolutely the center. And it's worth remembering that there is a journey here, particularly on the adaptation side. In January, of course, we have the big Adaptation Summit, which will be in the Netherlands, which will make this a very major theme. And this event that we're doing today is also being recorded and will be played back then for participants. And then, of course, leads on to COP26, because on the adaptation side, the world really is still quite a long way behind where we are on the mitigation side. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. What we're going to do now is have a quick fire panel of 3 people that were heavily involved in this listening tour, if you like. The first is Inga Jacobs-Matter, and she is the country director for the International Water Management Institute for South Africa. And then we're going to hear Sebastian Pedraza. He brings 2 perspectives. Youth, he's part of the Young Professionals for Agricultural Development, playing a very important role together with his colleagues in Colombia. He's going to bring both the perspective of youth and the perspective of Latin America. And then we have Mauricio Benitez, who brings a financial perspective. He's head of the portfolio for sustainable food at Responsibility Investments AG. So he's gonna bring the perspectives of the financial sector. Maybe the 3 of you can all put your cameras on now. I'd like to turn to you first, Inga. What have you learned from this process you've just been through? And tell us, give us that sort of Southern Africa perspective as well.
Thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon again to all the participants joining us virtually. Yes, the International Water Management Institute, IMI, and several other CG partners and regional partners, we hosted the Southern Africa 2DI Challenge, one of the 10 global challenges, where we focused on, how do we build a climate resilient future, climate resilient and water secure landscapes and livelihoods in 9 of the 16 SADC countries. And we started out, Bruce gave us a very ambitious brief in the beginning of the year, engaged with stakeholders in these listening sessions. And then COVID happened, right? And we had planned all these face-to-face engagements, and we had to pivot very quickly into a virtual space. And in many ways, that really helped us, because we were able to reach so many more people, so many more stakeholders. In the Southern Africa 2DI Challenge, we engaged with 286 participants in over about 19 listening sessions, virtual listening sessions, webinars, national consultations, thematic work discussions, even a private sector roundtable. And so, coming back to your question around what did we learn, I think, you know, it was really co-developing this vision for water and food security in Southern Africa, which is really needed. Southern Africa is a climate hotspot. Droughts and floods are on every agenda. And also having this R4D agenda that is aligned to stakeholder needs and priorities, really, you know, research that is fit for stakeholders to implement, and also an R4D agenda that is embedded in local context. So we've developed this ongoing community of practice. And I should really also, if I may, just have a shout out to the Resilient Waters Program, USAID's Resilient Waters Program, who were our partner, our regional partner in Southern Africa, Steve Collins, as well as the rest of the team, really working together to develop this community of practice around climate resilience. Thank you, Andrew.
Terrific. Thank you very much indeed, Inga. And I'd remind everybody that after this, we're going to open the floor to questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, press the Q&A, and then you can type in your questions, and then we will ask them. And feel free to ask to anybody, either these three wonderful panelists we have here now, or those that have spoken already. So we want to give everyone a chance to ask your questions. Sebastian, welcome. And congratulations on some pretty innovative things going on in your country right now. And just last week, Colombia, President Duque announced a new NDC, a new commitment, which was more ambitious than most countries. So I'm sure you had something to do with that. But would love to hear your perspectives, both from youth, but then also you look across the whole of Latin America. Anything you want to share?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much to everyone to have me here. I think this process has been really amazing. For many years we have seen that in Latin America we have found similar problems. Every country have a different also context, of course, but we can identify some patterns in all the countries. Mainly is that we are advising through industrialized agriculture, and in the case, for example, of Colombia and Brazil, this kind of companies and initiatives are developing, like such a big project of single crops, having, most of the land of the countries. But the thing is, and the key issue is that most of the food that we are eating every day, are produced for small farmers. Those are the ones that have, few land to plan and to develop these strategies. I think this kind of initiative, of 2 degrees initiative, gave us the opportunity to bring all the voices, together to solve the problem, because climate change in rural development is something that needs to involve all the sectors, governments, youth, international organizations, because we need to find solutions, together. And I think, especially for youth, I think we have been, facing different problems, and as we have lack of opportunities of rural areas, you are seeing that rural areas every day youth are moving into the cities, and in the future this is going to be a problem, because who will be the future, leaders that are going to produce the food that we need to eat? So I think this kind of initiative give us the opportunity to make that our voice be heard, and especially I think it's important to mention that this is a very, very good advance. I think this is if I remember some years ago, it was impossible to put together all to talk about something with the private sector, with government and youth. It was something that you can't imagine before. But right now it's something really possible. And I think it's we need to start to keep advising in this process. and it needs to start to switch into not just a consultation process. Would be amazing to have like a consult process, like advisory council or something like that, that bring all these ideas together into real and concrete actions, to add. I think for many years we have been discussing about how, fight against the climate change, and we are combined with something that is doing Wiper, and is a key message also that I want to leave here, is that rural development and the fight against climate change needs or demands, multi-sectoral efforts. And this is exactly what this initiative is doing. It's really powerful, and I think in Latin America, it's very promising. I think, and we are really excited to see what is going on after this, and we are really excited to put these ideas into real and concrete actions and proposals. Work together, as I mentioned before, with government, research centers, and all these sectors.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian, very much indeed. Let's turn to Mauricio. You're an investor. There's a perception out there that the investment community and the financial community is now actually getting quite good at assessing climate risks on the mitigation side, on energy and issues like that. Less so sort of maybe in agriculture and rural development, a little more complicated there. How do you feel the journey is going in that regard?
Many thanks, Andrew. That's really I think a key question. We are an asset manager, $3 billion under management, and we were very successful with financial inclusion and renewable energy in particular. We have products in sustainable food, so that's where I work, and it's been targeting productivity, how to improve rural livelihood. So you provide more working capital and fixed assets so they can grow more and better income. So that's how you improve their rural livelihoods. And that impact theme was very good. We were successful for 10 years, but we have realized that that's incomplete. If we continue doing exactly like that and only like that, by 2050, there's no world to feed. I mean, we cannot really feed the world with, as such, just aiming to increase production. So there is where we are targeting now food systems, and where we have partnered with the Cgiar CCAFs, and they've been instrumental. So we are now pre-marketing a new and innovative fund that is targeting food and agri-SMEs, innovative ones, transforming the food systems, but also normal SMEs that they are growing. But with technical assistance, pre-investment, assessing the climate risk and how to do it, and also post-investment, providing them support on how to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We are aiming to really be positive impact on climate. So if you want this money, there are certain criteria to be done, and that's where the CCAFs has helped us enormously in the design of this product, and now we will be in the execution. And yes, we see enormous potential here. So much that we for the next 5 years we are targeting solely climate finance as a way of growing. And we are already strong in renewable energy, so we are seeing food systems, land systems, water systems, nature-based solutions as the next subject. And there, to your question, this is much more difficult. I mean, microfinance, renewable energy, I can tell you there's a way to do it. These nature-based solutions, food systems, is circular, is complex, and there is where it's key to partner with people like the Cgiar, the experts. And we definitely see the potential of growing this to another 1 billion or 2 billion, just because we have this product that we are very hopeful that we can replicate in the partnership. I think the investment people are on one side and the scientists are on another, sadly. And if we follow those paths individually, we cannot really get to good results. What we're seeing is that we can meet in the middle and definitely do interesting things that can untap this 350 billion gap for food systems, 600 billion gap on conservation financing. Those are big numbers, and only 3% of climate finance is allocated to this, only 3%. So we see this partnership is key to unlock all that potential. So thanks, Andrew, again, for the question.
That is great. Thank you, Mauricio. That's really very interesting. We're going to sort of turn to some questions now that we're getting. And again, please feel free, if you've got a question, to go to the Q&A, write it down, and we will then see it on the screen, and we can ask people. I wonder if other speakers that have spoken already could turn your cameras on now, because then we'll be able to turn to you. The first question is for Sebastian here. Somebody is asking a very, very good question, which is, all the leaders are saying they want to include youth in decision making, include youth in how they do it. But actually, not all are managing to do that. What could they do more to include young people who, after all, are the ones with ideas and will inherit the future?
Okay, this is a really amazing question, I think. As I mentioned before, for many years we are advising, there is a change, in the message. I think international organizations and even governments right now are more interested to involve youth, because they know that we are, the future, the leaders of the future, and even of the present, I think. And I think it's necessary bring and open this kind of spaces where we can put our ideas, on the floor and tell about our proposals. But I think even more, we want to be part of decision-making processes. I think for many years we have been, telling about our voices and the challenges that we have in our territories and how we are dealing with these processes. But I think it's necessary, to open bigger spaces when we can participate and be part of this decision making, to make, these policies, these programs, these different initiatives in the different territories, because, in many years we can see that there are many ways where the government and international organizations can support, the initiatives that we have. But in many cases, they are just planning. When they are planning this kind of initiatives, they don't know our context. And that's why they never, call us to talk about, hey, what do you need? What works in your context and what doesn't work. So I think the first step is come to put together all the voices of the youth. And I think this 2 Degrees initiative is a perfect space. And the second, I think the future stage will be put together all in a kind of council or something, make that we are part of decision-making processes from government and international organizations. It's more about that.
Great, thank you so much, Sebastian. Question for Inga. Inga, you've just gone through this really interesting process, listening to people. Messages seem to be fairly clear. Where is what is preventing this kind of bottom-up consultative process then sort of feeding into both the research community, but also the government processes as well, and the policy process? Are people listening? Is it that we don't know the answers yet? Or is it that we know the answers, but we just have systems that are a little bit too rigid?
Yeah, this was something that we discussed quite a bit in some of the engagements, and in fact, it's really become one of the key themes for the 2 Degree Initiative Southern Africa Challenge. I think a lot of the challenge is around the policy coherence and institutional coordination in the region. So, this idea that we don't have a shared vision for water and food security. We've got limited intersectoral coordination. So that siloed mentality is still very, very pervasive. So this became one of the core themes for our challenge. How do we, build that policy coherence? How do we advocate for capacity strengthening and partnerships for delivery to really build that kind of collective coordination, the policy reform? So I think, Andrew, a lot of it rests on the the policy landscape, but I think also on other, it was really interesting listening to Mauricio, for instance, because I think this was one area that was also prioritized, emphasized in our engagements, the issue of sustainable finance to enhance low emission and resilient supply chains, both locally and globally. And what is the role of research in that? So it was also clear, we need that kind of partnerships. And yes, there are challenges, to scale, challenges of financing and accessing it, and challenges of climate data, and we heard about it all. But there were also equally good opportunities around the CGIAR, focused around deal sourcing of prospective investment opportunities, for instance, around advisory services that provide that kind of technical assistance for impact investors to achieve development impact.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Inga. Sorry, we're rushing on, so we have to keep our answers fairly short. Can we broaden that so that, look, there's something going on here, isn't there? I mean, for the last 50 years, we've in this space, we've been very understandably a sort of expert-driven kind of community, and perfectly reasonable. We do want experts. We now realize, though, that that's only part of the equation, and we actually need to just listen much more. Some organizations have been doing that for a while, but many haven't, and it's fantastic that that this initiative is active. What more can we do, sort of, and this is a question that's been asked, as we think about the processes engaged, both whether they're global like COP26 or whether they're, how do you set a work program for an agricultural research organization or for a government? I wonder whether, Marco, you want to say a word, because you're in charge with overseeing the whole of CGIAR as the board director. And then anybody else, maybe if you've got any insights, just raise your hand and I'll call on you on that. But why don't you kick off, and let's keep answers very brief.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yes, it is more about partnership. It is more about communications and outreach. You can never over-communicate. It is about engaging emotional intelligence, not just analysis and the expert's view, although, as you rightly said, the expert's view, we would be lost without it. So that is what it is about, and that is what we all need to think about, the implications of it in our space of where we work. For example, the engagement with national programs. We're having a big new generation of discussion in CGIAR with respect to that, how to engage with national programs in a fresh mode, how to be coherent in our operational and programmatic country presence, so that we break down silos, we work together, and that is what the CGIAR and the One CGIAR reform is all about.
Terrific, thank you. Anybody else want to take up this question? How can we do a better job? Maybe Alan, as you head towards COP26, I think you're. I was looking for the ones that were looking the most uncomfortable. So no. So Alan, as you're thinking about COP26, you guys spend a lot of time thinking about this. How do you influence it?
Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about this. I work with Marco on the CGIAR reform quite a lot. I mean, I sort of feel that if you want to move away from a sort of expert-driven, science-led approach to this, to something that is more demand-driven, more focused on outcomes and impact, then for me, the key issue is to change the incentive structure that exists within the institutions that do the work. I mean, if they're measured by actual performance of things in the field, things are actually changing among farmers, among end users, then I think you create an organization that is much more delivery focused and has a culture and operational a way of approaching its operations which are about delivery at scale. So if we're talking about moving to more end-to-end thinking, and end-to-end meaning, ultimately measurement of successes, things changing in the field, I think it is about, creating an incentive structure in the organizations that do R&D, which is different from that what it is now.
Yeah.
That would be my.
Terrific, terrific. Well, we have to come on to the last question now, but anyone who'd like to take this, maybe start with Mark, but then also Rebecca and Bruce, or anybody take this. The question relates to reform policy. As you look across the world, we're trying to get a sort of seamless investment in research and development, then that informed by citizens and experts, that then comes into really transforming the agricultural sector. What if there were one thing that you would like to see happen in government policy around the world, Mark? What would it be?
I think, Andrew, it would be to listen more to Sebastian. One of the things that's occurred to me during this session today is one of the things that climate change and agricultural research have in common is the long-term, short-term trade-off. And we don't put enough attention to either climate change or agricultural research because the costs appear short-term and the benefits appear long-term. And we've got to rely on people like Sebastian to really make those long-term, short-term trade-offs because people of our generation haven't done a good enough job. I'll stop there.
Terrific, terrific. Rebecca?
I actually think that was perfectly well said. I do not have a better point than that, so thank you.
Okay, that's great. Final question for Bruce. What's the next for the 2DI flagships?
So now it's going to be more reflection on exactly which direction we should go in terms of the global themes. A lot of the work has been done at the regional level. We need more at the global level. So that's part of the next step. The next step at the regions is actually getting down to hypotheses, research questions, the more detail around the research agendas, because at the moment we're still identifying topic level things.
Excellent. Excellent. Look, thank you all very much. Sorry, we have to keep this very strictly to an hour because it's being filmed and that's the rule. So we now have to head towards the sort of the final reflections. I'm going to call on Daniel van Gilst, Senior Agricultural Advisor at Norad, just to share his perspective, having listened to the discussion so far. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for the invitation, and very interesting listening to the discussion here as well. And there's no doubt in my mind that the 2DI 2-degree initiative is strategically placed to help respond to find solutions in the locations and for the locations. The 2DI program is regionally present, supporting local and national institutions. Norway actually supports putting in place the One Health platform, which is mentioned by Bruce, but actually we support almost all 10 regional challenges, which Bruce actually alluded to earlier. I find that the 2-degree initiative program has started this process towards the challenge programs to be very uplifting. Identifying focus areas and research areas, the process has been really inclusive. It's not a Cgiar standalone initiative. It's many stakeholders were consulted through many meetings. From large stakeholder meetings, like we've heard earlier, down to smaller group meetings involving local and national stakeholders, back to the larger stakeholders, and so on and so forth. So just to get the right type of agreement here to find the right program. I have attended some of these meetings, and my experience has been that this process has been inclusive, informative, and inspiring, actually. It's of course not a national or a local foresight study, but the process does represent a regional, national, and yes, in some cases, even local view to a situation. So this process, with the numerous meetings resulting in the roadmap actions and the partnerships required, all that discussions coming out to this global program. But and here comes really my points, basically, is that the remaining, what is remaining, and the process is the process to design a program which is locally informed and designed, that then leads to transformational change. We are still far from having a final proposal on the table. So there are still many hurdles. To researchers and to myself, the 10 challenges which Bruce presented are all relevant, but really they don't mean anything. They don't mean anything until the program becomes relevant and realistic to the people in the field, basically. It becomes relevant when the farmers are directly involved and consulted, and it's basically also what you alluded to in the discussion. I hope that when the programs become more granular, that we will see more activity in the field, in the field level, which include also the local stakeholders. And finally, I'd like to sort of underline a bit also what other people were also mentioned, is that you know, Norway in the last 10 years we've had a program supporting the Research for Development Crop Wild Relative project with the Crop Trust. And this project includes national partners and Cgiar centers, research institutions, and private sectors, all working broadening the genetic base for crops to make them more climate resilient. And anybody dealing with the climate, with crop wild relatives will know that 10 years is really a short time. And so actually what I'm saying here is that this research for the development, we have to be in it for the long haul. It's not a done deal very quickly. It takes time. So in conclusion, the 2DI has made an excellent start, starting a large, extensive and inclusive stakeholder discussion process, identifying these challenges and focusing on being locally relevant, politically connected, target-oriented and partnerships based, just what Bruce has been talking about. So I look forward to seeing these challenges materialize and be relevant for the end recipient, Andrew. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. That was just a wonderful statement. And finally, to summarize and give us our marching orders, it's great to have Ana Maria Laboguerrero here. She is the head of global policy research at Cgiar's climate program. So Ana Maria, what should we all be doing next?
What we'll be doing next, well, Bruce already alluded a little bit in relation to that. So we need to get more concrete into a research agenda, coming up with clear, straightforward research questions, outcomes, milestones, so that we are able to start really implementing this. Another thing that we can start doing as a community, as a group, it's really, I think that we are at the right time to work together in terms of securing some resources to start addressing some of the needs that we have already heard. And we are not starting from scratch. Mark already mentioned, we have secured some resources to start a very exciting agenda that focuses on capacity building, on scaling in order to respond to those needs so that millions of farmers in Africa can be better prepared to address the climate change challenges. I would just like to highlight one word that resonated in my mind every single time that I was listening to you, and was the importance of partnerships. So Marco said partnership is the glue. Bruce mentioned partnership-based strategies. Mauricio mentioned the importance of the partnerships between the scientific world and the private sector. So I think that this is something that is totally key and relevant in order to move forward. I would just like to finish by thanking everybody that brought us to the place that we are right now. So the organizers of this event, the panelists, the participants that inspired us with their questions. But most important, I want to deeply thank the 1,465 stakeholders that participated in this listening tour, as Andrew put it. Really, you're the ones that are helping us to transform the way that we do research, being able to deliver these end-to-end sustainable and scalable solutions. So thank you very much for that. With that, goodbye and take care.
Thank you, Ana Maria. What a wonderful way to end. Hard to imagine a more exciting or a more important challenge we have ahead of us, and how brilliant that we are making such progress, listening to those closest to the ground. And we'll all be watching each other and accountable to each other as we move this forward. So thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of the day, whether it's the evening or the morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much.